Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. The Lord is good, right? I was just thinking this morning, we were talking about sometimes we go through trials, but even through trials, the Lord is still good. And that's when His name gets lifted up, right? So, yeah, sometimes life doesn't always go as we plan, but God is still good. God is still on the throne, and I'm thankful for that. Maybe we'll start out this morning with a word of prayer, okay? Maybe I'll ask you all to stand. A word of prayer, please. Father, we thank you for your goodness this morning. We thank you for your faithfulness. We thank you that you are God and you are good and you're still on the throne. Thank you that you love us and that you sent Christ to die on the cross for our sins. Thank you for your word that is a roadmap to life and that guides us through this life. We thank you for that. Thank you for the guidance of your Holy Spirit. I pray you be with each one this morning. As you bless this Sunday school lesson, help me, Lord, and just pray that you'd be lifted up through it. Pray for the children's Sunday school class. Bless them as well. Bless the ones that are sharing with them, Lord, that they might come to know you also in a special way. We thank you for your goodness, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. You can be seated. Well, I wasn't sure what to have this morning. I was preparing for my message, and then I got to thinking maybe something that could tie a little bit in with my message. And I got to thinking about the first 4 words in the Bible when you first open your cover up. It says, in the beginning, God. And I had to think how simple those words are, and yet they're very profound if you start thinking about God. And I remember growing up as a little child, we'd have some pictures hanging on the wall, which was of Christ, but Christ is part of God. But they would always show him as maybe what we call somebody that's good looking, holding a lamb or whatever. And I think, is that really a true picture of God? And has anybody seen God? And what if somebody asked you, what does God look like, what would you say? So there were some questions I thought we'd look at this morning. And if you have a thought, I'm going to open it up to anybody who has a thought or wants to share, you go right ahead. But I had all these questions. Who is God? What does he look like? Has anyone seen God? And does he have a beginning and does he have an end? So they're all, I guess you could probably make a message out of every one of those questions. You could get into a really deep discussion on it. But in the beginning, God, and that word God comes from the Greek word Elohim, or the Hebrew word Elohim, which means a supreme being or a very great being, mighty or exceedingly when it comes to divinity or supreme deity. So, as we think of God, you know, you have to also look when it talks about having faith in God, like a little child has faith in their father. So he's our Father. We all know as Christians he's our Father. But just exactly who is he? So, if I would ask you this morning, who is God? Does anybody have anything you'd like to share when you think about who is God? What would you tell somebody if they walked to you up on the street and say, well, who is God? How would you explain it to them? Does anybody have any ideas what you would tell somebody if they just walk up to you in the street and say, well, who is God? Because I remember I was at my brother's place, and we had a supper, and they had the neighbor boy up, and we were having prayer, and he was cutting up through prayer, and so after the prayer, my sister-in-law started to chew him out for cutting up on prayer, and I said, wait a minute. I said, no, we need to go back, Father. So I asked him if he knew who God was, and he said no. He had no idea who God was. So I tried to explain to him a little bit on who God was. So does anybody have any thoughts, like who is God? If somebody asked you that, what would you tell them who God is? Yeah, that's the first thing that came to my mind when I was talking to my little boy. I said, well, he's the one that made you, and he made everything around you that you see, the grass. You know, he's the creator. So yeah, that's the first thing I had. He's the creator of the world, and he's also the creator of man. And he's behind every part of life in this world or this earth. Without him, there would be no life. He's the one that says that he breathed into man, and man's nostrils the breath of life. He's the one that created all life. So without God, there would be no life on this earth as we know it. And he's behind everything, and to whom everything must finally be traced. So, now I know the atheists would say there is no God, and I remember working at the sporting goods store, and I had a boss that was a proclaimed atheist. And one day we got into a discussion right there in front of, there wasn't too many customers in the store. We started talking about God, and he said, well, I don't believe in a God. So I said, well, I got some questions for you. He said, what's that? I said, where'd you come from then if there's no God? He said, well, I came from my mom and my dad. And I said, well, where'd they come from? He said, well, from my grandma and grandpa. And so we kept tracing them back until finally I said, well, where did all your ancestors come from? He said, well, I just believe what the scientists say. They all came from a rock that exploded. And I said, well, where did the rock come from? He's like, I don't know. It just always was. I said, well, if you can believe that a rock always was, why can't you just believe in a God that always was? Yeah. You know, so some of that, you know, you can eventually, you get people to think that sometimes you can't always believe. Yes, scientists have come up with a lot of good things, but you can't put your final trust in a scientist because they're not always right. So anyway, yeah, God is in everything that he's finally traced back to everything on this earth. How do we know he exists? If somebody would say, well, how do you know that God exists? How do you know he's real? What would you tell them? I mean, how can people know that he really truly exists? What would you tell a child or something and explain to them how God exists? Right, it's by faith. Maybe I'd reverse it another way. Is there anything that we can see tangible that would prove there is a God? Like that we can actually see? It is in the Bible, that's correct. I have some verses I'm going to read. Psalms 19, to those of you that might have your Bible. The Bible does tell us, explain to us how we can know that there is a God, that he exists. In Psalms chapter 19, verses 1 through 6, it says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day utter speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is going out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoices as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from the end of heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it, and there is nothing hid from the heat thereof. So the verse 1 there says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. So we can see God through nature. You can look around at nature, and if you get to really thinking about all the colors and the different species, you'd have to finally, I would hope you could recognize through all that there is a God, because to believe that just all happened when you really think about how complex it is kind of foolish, although still people like to say, well, it just all exploded and came to be. But if you really think about how different many species, you look around, there's thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions sometimes of different bugs and all that. And I know on our honeymoon we've seen some bugs that we've never seen before. So God declares himself through nature. Over in Romans 1, it also tells about how we can see God. Romans chapter 1 and verses 19 and 20. It says, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. So it's telling us that people are without excuse. And I had to think, in different nations, they might not have the written word of God. And yet this tells us that they can recognize you're the God just by the things that are created. So that's what I have there. We can see him through nature. We can also, if you think about it, we can see him through miracles, know how he exists through miracles. God still does miracles today. You see people get healed, or somebody tells you about something that happens that defies human reasoning. So God still reveals himself through miracles. Anything else? Does anybody else have any thoughts about how you can know that God exists? If not, I'll go on to the next question. Has anyone here seen God? And what I mean by that, have you ever seen him in a bodily form, like just you and I see each other? Has anybody ever seen God? Has anybody ever in the past or in Scripture ever seen God? The Bible does tell us no man hath seen God at any time. We're going to look at some verses. I'll pass some verses out. Brother, would you want to get John 1:18? You want to look up John 1:18 for me? Brother Joe, would you look up John 6:46? Nate, would you want to look up 1 John 4:12? And then I'll give you Job 9. Or maybe I'll take that one. Job 23. I want to look at it, verses 3 through 10. All right, you can read John 1:18 if you want. This is an answer, has anyone seen God?
No man has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, who is from the Father, he has declared him.
Okay, that tells us no man has seen God at any time. And we'll be looking at some other verses later on in Exodus, but no man has seen God in his glorified form and would be able to live because of just the holiness and the glory of God coming from that. Our human body cannot take that. Now, I mean, Christ himself said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So we know that Christ and God are one, they work together. So people did see Jesus Christ, but no one has ever seen God in his glorified being, so to speak, and would live because the human body cannot withstand that glory. John 6:46.
Not that any man hath seen the Father, save he which is of God. He hath seen the Father.
Okay, so that's bringing out their Christ, which is part of God. When they saw him, they saw the Father. Not necessarily in person, but through Christ they could see God's character and all that. 1 John 4 through 12. Yes. Or 1 John 4, verse 12.
No man has seen God at any time. If we love one another, God dwelleth in us, and his love is perfected in us.
Okay, just through another verse, basically like John 1:18, confirming that no man has seen God at any time. I'll read Job 9, 1 through 11. This is what Job had to say. It says, Then Job answered and said, I know it is so but truth, but how should man be just with God? If he will contend with him, he cannot answer him 1 of 1,000. He is wise in heart and mighty in strength, who hath hardened himself against him and hath prospered, which removeth the mountains, and they know not, which overturneth them in his anger, which shaketh the earth out of her place, and the pillars thereof tremble, which commandeth the sun, and it riseth not, and sealeth up the stars, which alone spreadeth out the heavens, and treadeth upon the waves of the sea, which maketh Arcturus, Urian, and Pleiades, and the chambers of the south, which doeth great things past finding out, yea, and wonders without number. And then Job went on to say in verse 11, he said, Lo, he goeth by me, and I see him not. He passeth on also, but I perceive him not. So as I was thinking about that, really, if you think about it, God is kind of like the wind. We can feel the wind, you can hear the wind, but we can't see the wind, but we can see the effects of it. So it's kind of like God. We can't see God in person, but we can see what he does around us, what he's created around us, and through that, know there is a God. In verses 32 and 33, it says, For he is not a man as I am, that I should answer him, and we should come together in judgment. Neither is there any day man betwixt us that might lay his hand upon us both. So Job recognized that he couldn't see God, and yet through it all, and Job, different times we can read where he talked about the things in nature and all that through all the book of Job, and God even asked Job complex questions to show Job that God alone has all the knowledge, and has knowledge way beyond the power of man to be able to understand. Job 23, verses 3 through 10. Go ahead, Ben. You got it.
Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his seat. I would order my cause before him and fill my mouth with argument. I would know the words which he would answer me and understand what he would say unto me. Will he plead against me with his great power? No, that he would put strength in me. There the righteousness might dispute with him, so should I deliver forever from my judge. Behold, go forth, but he is not there, and backwards, but I cannot preserve him. O the left hand, where he doth work, but I cannot behold him. He hideth himself on the right hand, that I cannot see him. But he knoweth the way that I take when he hath tried me. I shall come forth as gold.
Okay, Job, yeah, he said, Job's cry was, he says that he wished he knew where he might find him, that he might come even to his seat. And I think we can all say sometimes we wish that God was in personal bodily form, that we could go get a hug from him or something. But I had to think, when I ask how we know he exists, we can also know he exists through others. God uses us to reach out to others and show God's love to them, to be able to show to them that there is a God that works in the heart of men. So are we allowing God to work through us to prove to others that there is a love and there is a God? Then like Job went on to there to say that, he says, will you plead against his great power? So God has a lot of power. We're going to look later on about some of the attributes of God and what all God does and how he's so much higher than man. I have this question then, what does God look like? If a little child asks you what God looks like, what would you tell them? How would you explain to somebody what God looks like? Got any thoughts, Dana, on that?
I guess like your parents, the face of your parents.
Oh yeah, he is our Father, right? So, does he have human form? I had one guy I was talking to, he said, he believes that God is just some mythical spirit that floats around. And he said, that's all how we're going to be when we get to heaven. I was like, well, I'm not planning on being like that. I mean, it talks about a new heaven, new earth, and Genesis tells us that we're made. I was just talking to my wife this morning. It says that we were made in God's image. So I truly believe that he does have human form or some kind of bodily form, and we can, I think, see that in a couple of places in Scripture. I'm going to read something out of Exodus chapter 33. And we know different times back then that God would speak face-to-face with people. He spoke face-to-face a couple times, several times with Moses. But in Exodus chapter 33, it would seem like Moses sometimes would have the same desire that we would have sometimes. Maybe wish that we could see God face-to-face or be able to see what he looks like. And in Exodus 33, verse 18, Moses said this to God. He said, I beseech thee, show me thy glory. And this was God's answer to him. He said, I will make all thy goodness pass before thee, and I will proclaim the name of the Lord before thee, and will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. And he said, thou canst not see my face, for there shall no man see me and live. And the Lord said, behold, there is a place by me, and thou shalt stand upon a rock. And it shall come to pass, while my glory passes by, that I will put thee in a cliff to the rock, and will cover thee with my hand while I pass by, and will take away my hand, and thou shalt see my back parts, but my face shall not be seen. So God said Moses would see his back parts, but not his face. So I think we'd all agree with it. I think from that we could be correct to say that I think God has a bodily form. I mean, he has, human, I don't know if I want to say human form, but he does have bodily form because it talks about his back parts and his face. So from that, artists have tried to draw God and Christ and everything. They're just using their imagination and all that. So anyway, does anybody else have anything you'd like to say, Paul?
Well, you showed him his back, right? And his back's got 33 bones in it, right?
Well, we don't know how many bones God would have, but if we're made in his image.
On your back, your spine has 33 bones in it. Each of them have nerves that go, 2 sets of nerves that go on each side of your body. 66, it's your Bible, 66 books. That's how you see God. Right. Through the Bible. Right.
Yeah, and I would like to think if we're made in God's image, and we're all supposed to basically be Christ-like, a little Christ. But yeah, we're made in God's image, so obviously God fashioned us. So yeah, he has a back, parts of the face, so I would say he does have a bodily form. Exodus 34:29, and this is more on God's glory that I talked about, that you could actually see his glory in its full strength and experience it. Now, Moses went up and met with God, and it does say in verse 29, it says, "It came to pass when Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tables of testimony in Moses' hand. When he came down from the mount, that Moses wist not, or Moses didn't know, that the skin of his face shone while he talked with him. And when Aaron and all the children of Israel saw Moses, behold, the skin of his face shone, and they were afraid to come nigh him." And it just goes on to say that they put a veil on Moses' face because it was shining so much from God's glory. So we know that the glory that radiates from God is very bright, and Moses' face reflected it so much that they had to cover up his face because they were afraid of him. Exodus 24:17. Another thing here just talks about the sight of the glory, and this is what it describes God's glory as. It says, "And the sight of the glory of the Lord was like devouring fire on the top of the mount in the eyes of the children of Israel." So there it just talks about God's glory and how it's like a devouring fire, very bright. And I think we all know what a very, big fire, these forest fires they have and stuff, how bright it is and how bright the light comes from a very big fire. Daniel also described God in the book of Daniel chapter 7. And that was one, as I was talking with my wife, that we had both thought about, was in Daniel. It doesn't give us a real detailed description, but Daniel did describe the Ancient of Days. And later on talk about how they brought Christ, Son of Man, Christ before him. Daniel chapter 7 verse 9 is what Daniel said. He said, "And I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like a fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire." And it says, "And a fire stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened." On down it talks about how it says, like one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven and came to the Ancient of Days. So there it says that his head was like the pure wool. It doesn't still give us a real detailed description of God, but it said that his head was like the pure wool, and all of us know what wool is. If it's really, really pure, it's a white, real white. So it describes that his hair was there as white. But beyond that, knowing that God has bodily form and his hair is white, I don't know of any other place in Scripture that would describe any more of God's form or whatever. Does anybody else? Can you think of anything? Dana?
Wasn't there a place in Revelation in the beginning where it talks about his feet were like burnished brass? And
You know what? There might be. I didn't think of that one.
I think it's in the first 4 chapters or someplace. I forget now, but I thought there was some type of form. I was probably calling it Jesus, but
I know sometimes it'll talk, let's see. In chapter 1, it talks about the Son of Man, which would have been Christ. So it does talk about Christ there. It also talks, verse 13, it says, "In the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man." It says his head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace. And his voice is the sound of many waters. So there it would describe Christ also, like that his head and his hairs were white like wool, like the one that we're talking about, God, the Ancient of Days.
I think of Isaiah 53. I don't know.
That would be there at Christ again, right?
No former.
Yeah.
Only
That's
no
it.
baby that we should desire.
Yeah, and I've talked about that with other people before. It doesn't sound like Christ was this tall, handsome hunk, if you so to speak, that a lot of pictures like to make him out to be. I think he would have just been like the common working man.
I found the verse he's looking for is Revelation 4:3.
Revelation 4:3. Okay. Says, and he that sat, okay, in the cell, it says, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. And he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone, and there was a rainbow round about the throne in sight like unto an emerald. They asked the question there. Now, John, that was John's vision of God's throne. So yeah, it says that he looked upon like a jasper, something very beautiful. Still doesn't really give us any of these physical features, but we do know that the brightness, the glory of God, there is a beauty to him, and also to Christ. John 4:24 says that God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. And that word spirit there means, if you go look it up in the Greek, it says a current of air, breath, or divine, or superhuman. So like I already described, I said God is like the wind. You can't see him, but you can see the effects and what he does. Does anybody else have anything you want to say about God when you think about who he is or what he is? Because I thought I'd go on then and talk about some of his attributes that would describe his character. I don't know. I guess like Dana said, you would just tell him he's like your father. Would be the best thing to tell a child. You can think about your father and how he loves you, but he also disciplines you. So that's how God is. And I had to think that it's like Christ said, you have to have a faith in God just like a little child has a faith in his father, or you can't please God. That's how simple and a faith we have to have in God. I put on here, the first one is God is all powerful. And when we think about us as humans, or even the big machines we have today, there's still a limit to the amount of power. You think about the big jet engines and how they can go faster than the speed like Mach. I don't even know what the newest ones go. But there's still a limit to that power. It only goes as much as what the knowledge of man and how fast they can torque them things or whatever. But with God, there is no end to his power. His power is limitless. And nothing is impossible with him. Genesis 17. I'm going to pass out some more verses. Let's see, Austin, would you want to look, or is he not in there? I guess he's not in there. Dana, would you want to look up Genesis 18:14? You got your Bible?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You know what, Sonny, you want to look up Genesis 18:14? Let's see, Brother Joe, you want to look up Genesis 17:1? And these will talk about God's power and how powerful God that you and I know. Genesis 17:1. Got that there, son?
Actually, 18.
Oh, 18:14. Sorry about that. Yeah, Genesis 18:14.
You ready?
Yeah.
Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the time appointed, I will return unto thee, according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son.
Okay, that was there with Abraham and Sarah. As we know that God promised Sarah a son. And he asked questions, is anything too hard for me? And it's like, when you think about that, there's nothing too hard for God, yet in our human form it's a little bit hard to understand that because we all have an end to our strength. I had to think about it. You can get up in the morning and really feel good and strong, and by the end of the day you're just whipped. If you work hard and your strength is pretty well going. And you think about all, God, it says his eyes run to and fro upon the earth, seeking on whose behalf he might show himself strong. And yet, isn't that wonderful we serve a God that don't get tired? His power is always there to show himself strong on our behalf. That'd be pretty bad if we served a God that by the end of the day was tired and that one couldn't do anything more for us, But in our human form, that our power has an end where God doesn't. Genesis 17, verse 1.
And when Abram was 90 years old and 9, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God, walk before me, and be thou perfect.
So he said he was the Almighty God. I'm sure in back in Bible times, there was times too I had to think they'd get discouraged, and like Elijah, he ran off thinking that he was the only one to serve God. I think he kind of thought that God no longer cared about him or whatever. And yet, God proved even to him through nature and some things he did there with the fire and the wind proved to him that there was still a God that was in control of everything. And I had to think, how chaotic our world is getting, yet God's still in control. I mean, we might look around and say, oh my, things are going way out of control, and yet God still has it all in his control. And he's still in charge of all of it. And we know that as the end time approaches, things are going to get worse and worse. And yet I think that should be a comfort knowing that we serve a God that's all powerful and he's not going to let things go beyond his control. Isaiah 40 says this in verse 25. To whom then will you liken me, or shall I be equal? So he asks, who are you going to liken me to, saith the Holy One? Lift up your eyes on high, and behold, who hath created these things that bringeth out their host by number? And I think when we look up and just see the millions and trillions of stars, and the stronger the telescopes they get, they keep finding new stars and new planets. Recently there was something in the paper where they found another new one, and I think it was by Mars or something, some sun or something next to Mars. They found something new with one of their powerful telescopes. And yet, God is so knowledgeable, He knows all their names and everything else. He put them all up there, hung them all up, and they keep revolving just like He created them to do. And He says to lift up your eyes to the one that did that. He said, He calleth them all by names by the greatness of His might, for that He is strong in power, and not one faileth. And if we were given that task to do something like that, we'd say it's impossible, but with God it was just a small thing. I mean, He spoke the word, it all came into being, and He showed forth His power, and He keeps it all going, all revolving, the same like when He created it. And then He said, Why sayest thou, O Jacob, and speakest, O Israel, my way is hid from the Lord, and my judgment is passed over from my God. So He said, why do you say that you're hid from God, and that He doesn't see you? And what you do is hid from God. He said, Hast thou not known, hast thou not heard, that the everlasting God, the Lord, the Creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary. There is no searching of His understanding. He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might He increases strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength, and they shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. So I had to think about when we come to the end of our strength, that's when God's strength has to take over. And I told my wife, I said, it is so easy sometimes to try to reason everything out in your human mind, but sometimes you just finally got to trust God. Because you don't, I told her, I said, even me, I don't have the answers to everything. I mean, my knowledge, there's a limit to my knowledge. And so sometimes I said, but I know one that has the answers, right? God has the answers. I said, we don't have the answers. We go ask God to show us the answer, right? And He's faithful in that. Eventually He'll show us what to do with whatever the decision is we have to make. And so, yeah, He created and sustains all things, yet never grows weary. Is there anything else anybody wants to say about the power of God? Maybe I'd ask this, have you ever seen the power of God in your life? What have you? Have you ever experienced miracles? Of course, the biggest miracle is when you got born again. That's the biggest miracle on a person's life, amen? That He could take some wash you as white as snow, and all the stains of sin can be washed away. That's another form of His power. Give us a clean heart. Another one of His attributes is He's all-knowing. Like I already talked, our knowledge is limited. There's a limit to Him. And no matter how smart the person is, you can take the smartest person in the world, and eventually he's going to come to the end of his knowledge and get stumped on something, to where he won't have an answer for something. And yet, it's so a blessing to know that we serve a God that's all-knowing. He knows everything. At least it should be. Now, I had to think, because if we recognize that He is all-knowing, and those that aren't living right, it should get them to think that you can't hide anything from God. I'm going to pass out some more verses. Really, you want to look up Romans 11:33 through 36? Yeah, Romans 11:33 through 36. Ben, you want to look up Job 37:16? And Nate, I'll have you look up Psalm 147, verse 5. And before that, I'm going to read Job 40, verses 1 through 2. This is what talks about God's knowledge. Job said, God said, moreover, the Lord answered Job and said, shall he that contendeth with the Almighty instruct him? He that reproveth God, let him answer. And I think we all learned what we know. We learned from somebody, whether it was from when we went to school, somebody taught us at the job. Everything that we know was taught by somebody, and yet nobody taught God. He always was, and the knowledge he has, he's always had it. And so God was trying to get Job to think, says, well, who's instructed me? He said, nobody has instructed me. And he says, who is it that's going to reprove me or tell me that I don't know what I'm doing or have the knowledge? So when we think about that, it's an awesome God we serve, that he didn't need somebody to instruct him in anything. Genesis, Romans 11:33 through 36.
Oh, the depth of the riches, both the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his choices, and his ways past finding out. For who the Lord has known, the Lord the mind of the Lord? Or who has been his counselor? Or who has first given to him, and it shall be returned unto him again? For of him, and through him, and to him are all things, to whom people live forever. Amen.
So there again it asks the question, who hath known the mind of the Lord or whatever. And it just brings out, when I think about that, it's a little bit hard for us to understand that there's, somebody didn't need somebody to instruct them. Because from little one up, as a baby, we're always learning. We have to keep learning new things. You learn how to crawl, you learn how to walk. God didn't need to do any of that. I mean, he's all powerful and he's all knowledgeable. Does anybody want anything you like to put in about these scriptures or about God being all-knowing? Anybody have any thoughts on that? I guess when you just accept the scripture for what it says, it's pretty easy to understand, right? It's just when, I was talking recently to somebody, I've talked with people, and they're just like, the Bible is just too hard to understand. And I said, well, I got an answer for that. The Bible says you lack wisdom. Let him ask of God to give it to all men liberty. And I remember my dad telling me years ago, he's not here anymore, but he said he knows of a guy that learned how to read by going and reading the Bible. He said he asked God to help him learn how to read. He just went to the Bible, and that's how he learned how to read. So there's a lot of knowledge in the Bible, but not one person knows it all. That's why we need each other, right? Dana?
Yeah, then it said that Israelites were putting together the ephod and the robes for the high priest.
Yeah.
That God will give them the information and the knowledge on how to do that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you read through that, and even you think about the ark. Think about how the design of that. God gave it to Noah. And they said if you go down, of course now they have that life-size ark. I haven't been down there, but with all the work that went into it and the knowledge, and I had to think, I think it was Psalm said nothing new under the sun. If you think about man living Methuselah 900 some years, they could gain some knowledge. And yet still through all that, it was nothing compared to God. I mean, it was just peanuts compared to what the knowledge of God. And they had to get their knowledge from God, because God's the one that gives it to you. So it's pretty amazing what the knowledge that God gives to some people. I had to think, I was thinking about my car and all the parts, and I don't understand how all that works with some of that hybrid stuff, but it's like somebody God gave somebody the knowledge to figure it out.
I think one thing that differentiates the two is God has wisdom, and He can give man knowledge.
Oh, yeah.
Like wisdom, He only gave to a very few.
Right.
But most of mankind doesn't have it.
Yeah, you can have knowledge, and it doesn't mean that you're wise. You can still be pretty foolish. What you do with that knowledge. Some people the knowledge they have, they just use it for foolish, dumb things. Instead of doing it to bring glory to God or to do something constructive. Let's see, I had Job 37:16. Was that you, Brother Joe?
That was me.
Oh, okay.
In Psalms.
That can refer, wait,
Psalms 147:5.
okay, yep.
Is that, you want me to read that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great is our Lord, and of great power. His understanding is infinite.
All right, just another verse talking about God's great power. Did I give Job 37:16 to somebody?
I thought it was 36 or 16.
I'm sorry, Job 37.
37.
Sorry about that.
Dost thou know the balancing of the clouds, the wonders of the works of hand, which is perfect in knowledge?
So he's perfect in knowledge. There's no fault in his knowledge. He's perfect. I didn't think about that. Even think about the clouds and how they just float up there. That took a very knowledgeable God to bring all that to pass. And yet he just spoke it, and it all came into being. So his knowledge is perfect. There's no fault in it. The next one I want to look at is he is everywhere. And I had to think about how with all the technology we have, yet we can only be one place at one time. Now they have their electronic stuff where they can beam you, you can be speaking, they can show you somewhere else. But as far as in person, we can only be one place at one time. We're limited to that, and yet God is not limited to that as we are. Psalms 139, this is what it says about God and His presence. Psalms 139, 7 through 12. It says, and Job is talking, or the psalmist David is talking to us here. And I'm going to start at verse 6. It says, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. And right before that he said that God knows he's down sitting and he's upright. He says, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain unto it. So he said, God's knowledge, you can't attain unto that knowledge. He said, whither shall I go from thy spirit? Or whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend up into heaven, thou art there. And if I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning, and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall thy right hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, even the night shall be light about me. Yea, the darkness hideth not from thee, but the night shineth as a day. The darkness and the light are both alike to thee. So it's like, you know what, as I thought about that, we can't hide from God, no matter where we go. I seen how Jonah, he tried to hide from God, ran away, and yet God found him right there. So, and I had to think about how, when do men do their vile deeds? It's usually at nighttime, right? For the most part. If you go out and drink, get drunk, or whatever, you do it usually at night. And so still there's something within the heart of man, they think that the darkness is going to cover up their evil deeds. And yet God sees that just like as if it was shining like the day. So God, and as I thought about that, that should bring terror to somebody that's not doing what's right. But to those of us as Christians, that should bring comfort to us. That no matter what happens or where we find ourselves in whatever situation, knowing that God knows we're there and we need His help. So that should be a comfort to us in that part of it. So God is present in all His power at every point in space and in every moment of time. So it's never limitless. His presence there is with us no matter what. God is eternal. And I talked about this, how everything has a beginning and an end. But God is eternal and He has no beginning or end. I've tried to sit down and reason that out sometimes, but you can't in your human mind. He always was. You have to have a faith that He always was. But yet, we know everything has had a beginning. We were little babies once. It starts out as a baby, and then you get older, and then there's an end to it, you die. And yet with God, that's not how He is. He always was and always will be. He doesn't get old as we do. 2 Peter 3, verse 8, I have a couple of verses here I'm going to read about God being eternal. 2 Peter 3, verse 8 says, and I was talking about this yesterday with my wife, how God doesn't look on time as we do. I mean, we think of everything as, 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour. You go on and on, take it all the way up 365 days a year, and you can just take a way out. And I know with these math quizzes, they can take the numbers way out. And yet God doesn't look on time like we do. I mean, we look on time kind of in the space of 80 years and 10 some. Back in the day, they lived to 900 years, and yet with God, that's nothing compared to His eternal being or whatever. But verse, let's see here, in verse 9 it says, or verse 8 it says, "But beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day. The Lord is not slack concerning His promises, some men count slackness, but is long-suffering to us, word, not willing that any should perish, but all should come to repentance." So as I look around, I had to think, and different times I've asked my question, why God keeps putting up with everything that's going on. But He doesn't look on time like we do. And I said it's because of His long-suffering and His mercy, like I said, not willing that anyone should perish. So He's allowing time to go on to give more people more chances to get right with Him. But it's a little, as you think about that, it's just amazing that God doesn't look on time as we do. To Him there's no beginning and no end. Revelation 1 verse 8. This is what it says: "I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the ending, saith the Lord, which is, and which was, and which is to come, the Almighty." So He's Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. Like I said, everything has their beginning in God. He's the one that gives life, and then He's the one that takes life. Your ending is up to God too. We know that men can take their own life, but that's supposed to be in the hands of God. That's kind of what I had this morning about God, trying to help us to get a little picture of God and what He's like. Does anybody have anything you thought of that you'd like to add about God?
We haven't voted in the Trinity, God understanding in the first place.
Right. Yeah, there's God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. I didn't go like into Christ. We could went into Christ, and we could went into the Holy Spirit. All those you can get into deep Bible studies on them.
We don't have understanding of electricity. We don't understand how it goes.
Oh, yeah.
Push the lights on.
Right. Yeah. That's why it's called faith, right? There's going to be a lot of things we don't understand about Him. But I thought it is interesting. You can find, like I said, like the wind, and we can see God. And Scripture talks about some of the ways that He manifests Himself, through nature and all that. So I think, like it says, just a simple faith like a child in the Father. That's what we're supposed to have in God. And I don't think He doesn't expect us to reason it all out. Because He get, like I said, He limits us in knowledge, so that we have to depend on Him, right? So sometimes we just have to, whatever it is, place it in God's hand and know that He'll work it out according to His time and His way. But I was telling my wife, in our human mind, we want everything to be answered now. We want to answer now to everything. That's kind of the way it is, because we want to know what the future holds. We want to try to plan out into the future. Yet the Bible says, take no thought for tomorrow. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't try to plan, financial and try to work and be good stewards, but we're not promised another day. We're not promised tomorrow. We might not even be here tomorrow. So it's like, I got to remind myself when I start worrying about certain things, well, I might not even be here tomorrow. So just take today and walk with God today and let Him lead you, and then just place tomorrow in His hands. My mom made a profound statement where she says tomorrow never comes, because as soon as you're in tomorrow, it's today. So tomorrow really never comes. There's always another tomorrow. So that's what I had, with that, how God is all powerful and He's everywhere at once. There's way more attributes we could have looked at, but I thought that just gives us a little picture of God and the things that He does and what He's like and His power and His strength, and knowing that we do serve a powerful, awesome God, right? Serve an awesome God. And like I said, I've seen God do some good things in my life. I've seen Him do some miracles too. I think we probably all have, like I said, the miracle of salvation. But I've seen Him heal people, and recently I told somebody, I said, we still serve the same God they did in the Bible times, and He still can do the same mighty acts of healing. if you have faith in Him. And we have His written. And I said, one thing they didn't have back then, they didn't have the written Word of God like we do today. And that should be something we ought to be thankful for, that we can go there and get encouragement, where they couldn't do that way back before they had the written Word of God. God revealed Himself in person to them that way. But does anybody else have anything you want to add to it before we close? Okay, I guess we're on a prayer. Father, we thank You for this day. Thank You for Your word, and thank You that You give us a little picture of Yourself. I pray that You'd help us all to have a simple, childlike faith in You, and I ask that whatever anybody here might be struggling with, that You would just encourage them and lift them up and reveal Yourself to them, that You do love them and that You care about them, and that You want them to trust You. And I just pray for our families, especially, and the parents that have children, Lord. Just pray that You would guide and direct them, and bless our children that are with us, Father, that when they get older, they would put their trust in You with a childlike faith and just accept You as their Savior. I just pray that You'd be in the rest of this service, and that You'd bless each one, and be with those, be with Pastor and his wife and Starla and Rose as they went down south. Just bless them, be with them, put Your hedge of protection around about them, Lord. I ask You to protect us all as we go through this week, and help us all to just serve You faithfully. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, I'll let you all be dismissed. Thank you for your input.